reveal. While I held the hand of the man I thought loved me, he handed me divorce papers instead, because his mother told him to. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's time she learns her place." But what they didn't know was that I'd already learned it, and I came prepared. Before we begin, what time are you listening to this? And where are you watching from? Oh, I want to hear your story too, because mine is about how a woman erased from her own pregnancy, stood up in silence, and burned everything they built with one sentence. The afternoon sun filtered through the moss-covered oaks that framed the Moreau estate, casting long shadows over the perfectly manicured lawn. I adjusted the hem of my soft coral dress and glanced around the backyard. Guests milled about with glasses of sweet tea and champagne, laughing, snapping photos. Pink and blue decorations fluttered in the breeze, and a massive balloon arch stood proudly at the center, waiting. I had planned all of this, every detail, the guest list, the menu, the damn balloon vendor who canceled last minute. I found another one. I even chose the playlist. And yet, on each of the neatly printed programs placed on chairs around the yard, just under the heading, "Today's Celebration," were the words, "Hosted by Varela and Kieran Moreau." My name was nowhere. I blinked hard. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the printer ran out of ink halfway. But deep down, I knew better. I felt Lisa slide beside me, her arm grazing mine gently. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low and laced with caution. "Fine," I said, forcing a smile that barely made it to my eyes. "It's just a party." Lisa didn't buy it, of course. She never did. They don't even try to hide it anymore, do they? Before I could answer, a hush fell over the crowd. All heads turned toward the stone path leading from the back porch. There she was. Varela Moreau, my mother-in-law, descended the steps like she owned the sky. Silk dress clinging perfectly to her frame, diamond necklace catching the light, not a hair out of place. Her entrance could have put Hollywood to shame. Guests moved toward her like moths to a flame. "Oh, Varela, the setup is divine. You always have the best taste." I stood there, invisible in the very party I created. Lisa leaned in again. "You sure you want to keep pretending they respect you?" I smiled again, this time thinner. "I'm used to it." The DJ announced it was time. "Everyone gather near the reveal zone. Let's find out. Is it a little mister or a little miss?" I walked slowly with Kieran, who barely looked at me. His hand rested on the small of my back, just enough for the cameras but empty of warmth. We took our place beneath the balloon arch, the crowd cheering and counting down. 3, 2, 1. A soft pop, followed by an explosion of pink confetti that danced through the air like spring petals. Cheers erupted. "It's a girl!" someone shouted. I placed my hand over my belly, heart trembling, not with nerves but with a strange sort of ache. This was the moment I'd imagined for weeks. And still, something didn't feel right. Kieran stepped back slightly. My smile faltered. Then he reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a white envelope, thick, sealed, and handed it to me with the kind of cold precision that made my skin crawl. My fingers curled around it slowly. "I'm leaving you," he said, not quietly, not like a whisper meant just for me. He said it like a toast, a declaration, loud enough for the entire yard to hear. "It's time you learn your place." A stunned silence fell like a shroud. Gasps. Some people looked away. Others stared, unsure if this was some elaborate joke. Varela stood a few feet behind him, her arms folded, her chin slightly raised. That same smirk I'd seen too many times before stretched across her face. They planned this. I stared at the envelope. My throat tightened, but no tears came. Not this time. Instead, I swallowed. Slowly. Lifted my eyes to meet his. "I see," I said, voice soft but steady. And then, I smiled. Not the kind of smile you offer for pictures. No. This one was sharp. Quiet. Dangerous. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. I looked around, letting the silence stretch, letting the moment marinate. "Then I guess," I said clearly, "it's my turn." Murmurs rippled. Someone dropped a drink. Lisa's mouth parted, but she didn't speak. I have an announcement too. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The stillness that followed Kieran's humiliation had created a vacuum, one that sucked every bit of noise from the party. People were still processing the scene. My hand still held the envelope, now warmed by my skin. I didn't even look at it. Kieran blinked at me, his brows lowered just slightly, confused. Varella's smile faltered, not gone but rattled, like a glass set too close to the edge of a table. I took a breath, then stepped back from the balloon arch. But first, I said lightly, let me thank you all for this moment. A few polite, confused chuckles fluttered through the air. I nodded toward the crowd with a calm grace that even surprised me. Inside, though, something else stirred. Not panic, not heartbreak. No, something old, bitter, and cold. It had been building for 2 years. I remember the exact moment it began. It was Christmas. 2 years ago, I was standing in the hallway of their grand home in Baton Rouge, waiting for the ham to come out of the oven, holding a tray of deviled eggs I'd made. My eye caught the frame above the fireplace. A family photo. Everyone was in it, lined up on the wraparound porch, Varela in the center, Kieran next to her, his siblings, their spouses, even the kids. But me? I was cropped out. I stood there staring, eggs trembling in my hand, while the sound of carols floated in from the next room. That was the first time I felt it. Not forgotten. Removed. Like I'd been airbrushed out of their lives with intention. I'd asked Kieran about it later that night when we were back at our place and the tree lights glowed warmly in the corner. Maybe the angle was bad, he'd muttered. You were standing kind of off to the side, remember? I remembered. I remembered standing off to the side because Varela told me, let's keep the center clear for family. I hadn't said anything then. I'd swallowed it, like I'd swallowed so many things. But it kept happening. In subtle, precise ways. A month before this gender reveal, I found an early draft of the invitation Lisa had helped me design. It had our names. Join Odalis and Kieran Moreau as they reveal the joy of their growing family. I'd written that line myself. I remembered typing it. I remembered thinking, this time, maybe they'll see me. But the final version that went out? Hosted by Varela and family. No mention of me. Not once. Not as the mother. Not even as a host. Just erased. When I brought it up to Kieran, his response was instant and flat. Mom said it looked cleaner that way. Cleaner. He didn't look up from his phone when he said it, just kept scrolling. As if I were pointing out a typo. As if my absence, my literal erasure, was a branding choice. That night I locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the cold tile floor until my body stopped shaking. I pressed a towel over my mouth to keep from crying too loud. I was carrying his child and couldn't find my own name in her story. Lisa found me in there an hour later. She didn't say much at first, just sat down beside me and held my hand. Then, with a voice sharp like a pin to a balloon, she whispered, "You're not crazy. They're trying to make you disappear." Those words stayed. They became a crack in the wall I had built around myself, letting the light in. Harsh, yes, but necessary. So now, standing here again, this time before a crowd, with confetti still clinging to my shoes, I looked at Kieran and smiled with the kind of smile only a woman who's been burned learns to wear. "Let's see," I said slowly, "if you're as proud of what's next as you were of this little stunt." And with that, I turned. I didn't rush. I didn't stumble. My steps were steady as whispers rose around me like smoke, the kind of whispers people use when they realize they might have picked the wrong side to clap for. I didn't look back. Not yet. As I stepped away from the crowd, the sound behind me morphed into a dull hum, half curious whispers, half uncomfortable laughter. I didn't glance back, not because I was scared of what I'd see, but because I already knew what was there. I pushed open the side door that led into the house and let it fall shut behind me. The noise cut off like a switch. Silence. That clean, sharp kind. I walked into the guest bedroom Varela always kept picture perfect, lavender walls, untouched linen, not a single wrinkle in the duvet. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the envelope still in my hand. The seal remained unbroken. I hadn't looked at it. Didn't need to. I already knew what was inside. He thought I'd fall apart. He thought I'd tear it open and sob like a woman blindsided. But I wasn't blindsided. Not even close. I exhaled, long and slow, letting the silence settle around me like armor. It wasn't just this party. It wasn't just today. It was everything. All of it. A slow erasure. 1,000 moments that told me I was tolerated, not welcomed. Expected to stay useful, but invisible. Like last winter. We were sitting in our living room. Christmas lights blinked lazily on the windowsill. I'd just come back from a prenatal appointment, full of questions and half scared about the birth plan. I texted Kieran the details, doctor's recommendations, a few options to consider. Days passed. No response. Then one night, without looking up from his laptop, he mumbled, "Just do what you want." That was it. Just do what I want. No follow-up, no curiosity, just delegation. Later that week, at a dinner with his family, I brought it up again, softly. Maybe he hadn't heard me before. Maybe he needed the right moment. Varela was slicing a roast, her bracelet clinking with every move. She didn't even pause. "Kieran has enough stress, Odalis," she said smoothly. "Don't pressure him with all that." The room froze for half a second. Then his brother changed the topic to stocks. His sister laughed too loud, and I was left chewing my salad in silence, shrinking smaller with every bite. It happened like that all the time, until one night, I heard it for myself. I had gone to grab a folder from the hallway closet. Kieran was in his home office, the door slightly cracked. I wouldn't have stopped, but something in his voice made me pause. It was too casual, too confident. He was on the phone with his mother. "She's just the incubator," he said, chuckling. "Let her think whatever." My fingers went cold around the closet handle. I stood there still, pressing my spine against the drywall. Not crying, not then, just listening, just memorizing. He didn't see me standing there. He didn't hear the way the air left my lungs, and he didn't know that in that moment, something inside me shifted, quietly, but permanently. Weeks later, Lisa dropped by one morning with a tray of croissants and a pair of scissors. I was in the dining room, hand-tying little name tags for the baby shower favors. Alone, of course. No one from the family had offered to help. Not even Kieran. She stood by the doorway for a moment, then came in and sat down across from me. "You look like a ghost in your own house," she said. I smiled, brushing it off like I always did. "It's just been a long week." She reached across the table and gently tapped my fingers. "Oh, do you even exist to them?" That question landed harder than she knew, maybe harder than even I realized. Now, seated in that pristine guest room, I stared at my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. My cheeks were flushed. But not from shame, from clarity. They thought a woman like me wouldn't speak. They counted on it. That's why I will. I stood up, smoothed my dress, slipped the envelope into my purse, not as evidence, not as a symbol, but as a reminder. They wanted to end my story today. They forgot who they married. I stepped out of the room, heels echoing against the hardwood. I didn't rush, didn't sneak. I walked with purpose, with weight. I passed a guest in the hallway who looked startled to see me. I nodded politely and kept moving, back toward the lawn, back toward the stage, back toward the woman they thought would stay silent. They wanted a show. They're going to get one. As I stepped back into the garden, the shift in atmosphere hit me before I even reached the crowd. The air had changed, heavier, unsettled. Conversations lowered to murmurs. Eyes darted like they were afraid to meet mine. No more polite smiles. No more congratulations. I had interrupted their script. They parted for me without realizing it, like a school of fish when a shark swims through. My dress brushed against folding chairs and legs too stiff to move, but I didn't slow down. I passed Varela near the dessert table. Her hand hovered over a champagne flute, but her voice was steady, cold. "You should have stayed down," she muttered without turning to look at me. I didn't stop walking, just tilted my head slightly in her direction. "I haven't even stood up yet," I said. Her fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. I kept walking. My steps carried me across the yard, but my mind wandered, slipping back to 2 weeks ago. A Friday afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen counter, laptop open, working on the baby registry. I had spent hours researching the safest car seats, bottles without microplastics, and books that didn't reduce little girls to princesses waiting to be chosen. My name was right there at the top of the registry, Odalis Reyes and Kieran Moreau. By Monday, the registry was gone. Deleted. Customer service told me it had been marked as duplicate ownership and consolidated into the active one. Confused, I asked for the link. It arrived in seconds. The active registry read, Varela Reyes. Reyes. Not Moreau. As if I didn't exist. As if the child I carried belonged solely to the family that had already filed me away like an expired warranty. Every item was now marked, shipping to Moreau Estate. I confronted Kieran that night in the living room. "Why is your mother's name on the registry I built?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "She just wants to help," he said. "Help by erasing me?" "It looks better that way, okay?" He sighed. "You're not exactly great at branding." Branding. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. He stood, brushed past me toward the hallway. "You're overreacting." I didn't answer him. I just stood still, silent and deliberate. The next morning, I started making calls, not to registry support, to my lawyer. That same week, I stopped by the county office, on instinct. A whisper in my gut told me to check on the house, the one we had just moved into a few months ago. I'd co-signed everything. I remembered the paperwork. I'd been there, but something felt off. At the desk, the woman flipped through files, then tapped on her screen. "The current deed lists Kieran Moreau as sole owner." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "It looks like the ownership was refiled about 6 weeks ago. Would you like a printed copy?" I stood there, holding that paper like it had weight. I didn't cry in that office. I smiled, thanked her, walked out like nothing was wrong. I drove home with the windows down and the music off. That night, Kieran came home late. I met him in the foyer, document in hand. "I went by the clerk's office," I said. He tossed his keys on the table. "And?" "They said I'm not on the deed anymore." He shrugged like I'd asked about the weather. "You're not exactly business-minded, Odalis. I'm just protecting the asset." Protecting the asset, like I was a liability, an inconvenience. "Thank you for protecting it," I replied. "That was thoughtful of you." He stared at me for a second, unsure how to respond to the calm. That was when I knew he had underestimated me for the last time. Now, standing in front of the crowd, I scanned the space. The balloon debris was gone. The pink confetti had been swept to the corners like an afterthought. The dessert table was untouched, and the event banner still didn't have my name on it. Lisa appeared beside me, quiet as always. She didn't need to ask what had happened. She'd been watching. "They think you're going to cry," she said, slipping something into my hand. The mic. I curled my fingers around it and nodded. "No, I'm going to speak. Let them watch." I stepped forward, slowly, centered myself. The crowd grew still. I raised the microphone. "There's something you all deserve to know before dessert is served." The breeze tugged at the edge of my dress as I stood with the mic in hand, just a few feet from the dessert table draped in pinks and whites. The air felt too still, like the moment before a storm hits, when even the birds fall silent. "I was told today is the day I learn my place," I said. Somewhere in the crowd, a glass clinked too loud. Someone coughed. "They're right," I continued, "but it's not the lesson they expected." I let the silence hang, let it settle into every guest's chest, heavy and uncertain. And then, just for a second, I let myself drift. Back to that night. I had woken up to get water. The house was dark. the hallway lamp casting a dim gold across the hardwood. I was walking past Kieran's office when I heard his voice, low but careless in its comfort. "Nah, she won't be there for the delivery," he said, chuckling. "We're doing it in New York. Mom already has the suite lined up." A beat of silence. "Let her keep thinking she's in charge. She's just the incubator." I didn't step into the room. I didn't even breathe. I reached for my phone and hit record from the hallway, just in time to capture the tail end of the call. I stared at the door while it continued. "That's the plan. She'll find out after it's all done." When he hung up, I backed away and went straight to the guest room. I sat on the edge of the bed and replayed the recording once, twice, a third time, making sure I'd heard what I thought I'd heard. Not forgotten, erased, like I was nothing but a vessel, temporary, silent, disposable. A few days later, I had a checkup. My OB/GYN had transferred to a new practice, so I had to stop by the hospital to update my contact forms. When I asked if my husband's name was already listed as emergency contact, the front desk assistant frowned. "Actually," she said, scanning the screen, "there's no contact listed, and the delivery is set for St. Victoria in Manhattan with a private team under Varela Moreau." My heart didn't break in that moment. It hardened. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply sat on the floor of my kitchen, one hand over my belly, one hand on my phone, staring at the recording on the screen. I whispered to my daughter, "You'll never be treated like this." I meant it. Now, back in the garden, I raised my eyes and met Varela's gaze across the crowd. "You told your son to humiliate me today," I said, voice clear, even. People shifted. Some were confused, some visibly tense. A few looked at her with wide eyes. "What you didn't expect," I added, "was that I came prepared." Varela's expression didn't move, but her fingers curled tighter around her clutch. "I've been quiet for a long time. I played along, smiled through parties I wasn't welcome at, thanked you for gifts I never asked for, nodded through conversations where I wasn't invited to speak." I paused. "But starting now, I decide what I answer to. And I won't answer to shame." My voice didn't crack. It didn't rise. But it filled the space like thunder before the lightning. At that moment, Lisa stepped forward behind me. The sound tech by the speakers gave her a nod, and she opened the laptop she had been holding against her chest. I turned slightly, enough for everyone to see me gesture toward it. "Would you like to hear what they said?" I asked, voice steady, "when they thought no one was listening?" The murmur spread fast. People looked from one another to the table to the laptop, unsure whether they should stay or pretend to leave. No one moved. The hush that fell across the backyard wasn't peaceful. It was thick, uneasy. A crowd that had once buzzed with party chatter now hung on the air between one breath and the next. All eyes were on me. Lisa clicked the spacebar. The speakers cracked slightly before releasing Kieran's voice in full, unmistakable clarity. "I don't care if she cries. Serve the papers, smile for the camera, then we're done." A few gasps escaped from the crowd. Someone muttered, "Was that him?" Another voice followed. Varela's, cold and deliberate. "She's just the shell. My mom's handling everything after." Silence. I didn't need to say anything just yet. Their words did the damage. Faces in the crowd turned to Kieran, then back to me, and then to Varela, who now stood stiff, the color draining from her neck up. I took one step forward, holding up the mic. "That was just one call," I said, my voice firm but not raised. "I have 12. I archived every detail, but don't worry. I won't make you listen to all of them tonight." I let my fingers glide across the second envelope I had tucked beneath my palm. I unfolded it slowly. The deliberate movement spoke for me. This wasn't revenge. This was precision. "Let me show you what they forgot to erase," I said. The screen behind me changed again, this time displaying a legal document with my name at the top. "You see, about 3 weeks ago, I retained independent counsel. I had reason to believe that my marriage wasn't just falling apart, it was being disassembled strategically." A few murmurs turned into whispered questions, nods of realization. "So," I continued, "my lawyer and I did something your family forgot I was capable of. We made a plan. I took a breath, then pressed on. All jointly held assets, our house, the vehicles, the investment accounts, have been placed into a protective trust under my name, effective last Friday. Kieran's mouth parted. He looked like he wanted to speak, but no words came. I didn't stop. Kieran, your just-in-case plan to redirect assets? It backfired. You didn't protect yourself, I did. I clicked the remote again. A new document appeared on the screen, a digital certificate with a timestamp and a legal seal. This trust now holds 100% of the value designated for our child, pending paternity confirmation. And as of April 2nd, no third party can access or redirect that trust without my written authorization. I paused. Let that one breathe. Which means, I said slowly, your mother can't touch it. Neither can you, not unless you're prepared to face criminal liability for coercion. There was a flicker of something in Kieran's face, panic maybe, but it was Varela who stepped forward first. This is outrageous, she spat. This was meant to be a celebration, a family, and look at what you've turned it into. No, I said calmly. You turned it into this the moment you made arrangements for a child you didn't conceive, behind the back of the woman carrying her. Kieran reached out, finally finding his voice. This is being twisted. This isn't what it looks like. Baby, we can fix... Don't call me that. I turned to him, sharp, but not shaking. You were right about one thing, I said. I did learn my place, and it's not beside either of you anymore. His mouth moved again, but I didn't wait for more excuses. I turned, locking eyes with Varela. This next part, I said, tilting my head. It's yours. Lisa pressed a button. The screen flickered, and there it was. A photograph, grainy but clear. Varela leaning over a desk, sliding a manila envelope across a counter to a clerk in a small county office. The timestamp sat in the corner like a silent witness. The envelope bore the seal of the registrar's office. Gasps again. Not everyone understood what they were seeing, but they felt it. The kind of hush that settles when truth no longer needs an interpreter. The woman beside me whispered, "Is that bribery?" I didn't answer. I let the image speak. The image on the screen, Varela handing an envelope across a public clerk's desk, wasn't blurry or distorted. It was sharp, too sharp to deny. And when the voiceover followed, her voice, there was no turning back. Just make sure her name stays off everything. This is for the baby's sake. The murmurs turned into stifled gasps. A city councilman I recognized from our neighborhood barbecue stepped forward from the crowd, muttering to no one in particular, "That's illegal." I could feel the air shifting. The same crowd that once clapped for the pink confetti now recoiled from the truth settling in around them, not because it was scandalous, but because it was documented. I raised my chin slightly and clicked again. This next one, I said, isn't a photo. It's a message, one the hospital never meant for me to see. A screenshot appeared on the projector, a text chain between a hospital administrator and someone unnamed. The words were clear. I've been told she's not allowed access to her own birth plan. Is this legal? I didn't need to explain what it meant. Lisa, standing to the side with her stack of printed files, added the context the crowd needed. We obtained that from a whistleblower, she said, voice measured. The administrator was concerned. And then there was this. Another clip rolled. Varela again, her voice no longer sweet or performative, just business. Just flag her as unstable. I'll handle her delivery arrangements personally. A collective chill ran through the backyard. Not metaphorical, real. Several women, older, familiar, stepped back. One clutched her purse tighter. A few looked toward the church elders standing by the buffet table, frozen mid-bite. Lisa pulled out another folder. And finally, she said, handing me the phone, for those of you who still think this is a misunderstanding, I raised the screen toward the projector. Dozens of screenshots popped up, posts from a private Facebook group meant only for selective Christian mothers. In them, Varela had written about me, anonymously at first, but later by name. She called me unstable, a disgrace, unfit, and, what hit hardest, a dangerous influence to the Moreau legacy. Gasps turned to whispers, then to pointed looks. One of the women near the gazebo, her pearls catching the sunlight, whispered to her friend loud enough for me to hear, "She's been preaching about grace and unity for years." I met her eyes, didn't smile, just let her sit with that thought. I took the mic again. "This woman," I said, motioning gently toward Varela, "tried to erase me from my own pregnancy. She rerouted my medical care, my legal rights, even the birth plan for my child, because she thought I was disposable." There was no shouting from me, no venom. I spoke with the kind of calm that comes from knowing you've already won. Then, like a cornered animal, Varela snapped. She lunged forward, reaching for the mic, her words sharp and cracked. "You think this little performance makes you a victim? You're humiliating your own family in front of strangers. This isn't justice. This is a soap opera." I didn't step back. I simply lowered the mic, turned to her, and said evenly, "No, I'm not humiliating you. I'm revealing who you are, publicly, clearly, with receipts." I stepped around her like someone moving past an old piece of furniture that no longer fit the room. She was frozen there, stuck between rage and shame, like a queen without a throne, a title with no weight. Then came Kieran. He rushed forward, his words tripping over themselves. "We can fix this. Odalis, this is a misunderstanding. You're emotional. I mean, we can sue her. We can spin it." I didn't even have to answer. Varela did that for me. "Get away from me, idiot," she snapped, her voice laced with fury. "You've ruined everything." The crowd quieted again, but this time not from shock, from clarity. Their alliance crumbled right there under the string lights and pink decorations. And finally, I turned back toward them. My voice didn't shake. "Now you understand," I said, looking not just at them, but at everyone who had doubted, dismissed, or silenced me. Then I added with that same stillness that had carried me this far, "But you still haven't heard everything." A silence fell over the yard so thick it muffled the birds, dulled the breeze, and made even the creak of someone shifting on the lawn chairs sound deafening. All eyes were on me, some wide, some narrowing, most unblinking. I held the final envelope in my hand. Kieran's chest rose and fell like he was bracing for another hit. Varela's arms were crossed so tight across her chest, I swore her skin would bruise from her own grip. I let the quiet stretch. Then I spoke. "The baby isn't yours." The gasps came in waves, one sharp burst from the front, then rippling through the crowd like a chain reaction. Someone dropped their drink. Another whispered, "No way." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Kieran stumbled a step forward. "What? What the hell are you saying?" I kept my voice even. "You wanted me gone. You handed me divorce papers in front of friends, family, and strangers. That was your choice. And with it, you forfeited any right to question what comes next." He didn't speak. Couldn't. His mouth opened, then shut again. I could see the sweat gathering at his temples. I slowly opened the envelope and held up the paper inside without lifting my arm high or dramatically. Just enough for those near to see. "This is a paternity confirmation from the OB/GYN's office," I said. "Dated, signed, verified." He didn't reach for it, so I walked forward and placed it gently on the corner of the dessert table, between the untouched pink frosted cake and the scattered silverware. He didn't move. "I got it 10 days ago," I added, "after I overheard your plan to relocate the birth, after I found out about the suite in Manhattan, after I sat alone at my appointment while the front desk told me you'd removed yourself as my contact, not to punish you, but to protect my child." Kieran's voice cracked as he tried to find something, anything, to latch onto. "Alex?" he said, barely above a whisper. I nodded, just once. "The one who picked me up when you left me crying in the stairwell, the one who saw me when none of you did." That was when Varela broke. The calm, clipped queen cracked down the middle. "You whore!" she shrieked, her voice trembling more than mine ever had. Before I could speak, a voice from the crowd beat me to it. A cousin, Kieran's side, stepped forward, her arms crossed. Says the woman who bribed a hospital administrator and called her daughter-in-law unfit behind closed doors. And just like that, the crowd shifted. A few more people stepped back from Varela. Some turned their backs entirely. Kieran opened the paper. His eyes flicked from line to line like he was praying for a misprint, a typo, some technicality to undo the ink. But there was nothing. He looked up, hollow, pale. I didn't. His voice failed him. This can't. You planned this. No, I said simply. You did. Behind me, someone whispered, "This is justice." I scanned the faces, the same ones who laughed at me last summer when I spilled salad on myself at the Moreau Gala. The same ones who nodded along when Varela called me a nice accessory. Now they didn't know where to look. "You all came here today to celebrate a baby," I said, "and I gave you one. The truth. That's what I've been carrying all this time. While they schemed, deleted, erased, and refiled, I made plans of my own." Lisa moved beside me, her presence grounding, steady. She placed a hand on my shoulder, just enough pressure to ask without words. "Are you ready?" I exhaled. "There's just one more thing I have to do," I said softly. Then I turned, eyes still forward, already knowing what was coming next. 1 week later, the house didn't feel like theirs anymore. It felt like mine. The morning light filtered in through the east-facing windows, warm and slow, touching every corner of the living room like it belonged there. I walked barefoot across the hardwood floors, my fingers grazing the edge of the dining table, now decorated with soft white linen and clusters of pastel balloons. No more gilded initials, no more curated backdrops for someone else's legacy. On the table sat a stack of neatly folded napkins, embroidered in cursive script, Odalis Reyes. Just my name. No shared monogram, no missing letters. I ran my thumb across the stitching like it meant something, because it did. 2 weeks ago, my name didn't exist on their invitations. Now it was everywhere. And it wasn't about pride. It was about presence. I'd made space where they tried to erase me. The soft clink of ceramic echoed from the kitchen. Lisa was arranging cupcakes, lavender frosting, lemon base, her signature combination. "Smells like real sugar in here again," she teased, setting down the final tray. We exchanged a look. No need for thank yous anymore. We were past that. She knew what she'd helped me reclaim. I stepped into the garden, the same space where Kieran had handed me divorce papers in front of 50 people, now cleared of rented chairs and shallow smiles. In their place, a new fountain I'd picked out myself, birds dancing at its rim, the soft trickle of water threading peace into the air. I lowered myself into the cushioned chair beside it, journal open on my lap. A light breeze stirred the pages. "There was a time I believed surviving quietly made me strong," I wrote, "but surviving isn't living, and silence is not strength when it costs you your voice." I placed a hand on my belly, felt the flutter beneath. It didn't knock like panic this time. It moved like curiosity, steady, present. "She deserves a mother who didn't just make it through," I whispered. "She deserves a mother who stood up." Just then, the garden gate clicked. Alex entered slowly, not as a savior or a grand gesture, but as himself. No need to fix or claim anything. He carried a small bouquet in one hand, a box of herbal tea in the other. Lisa greeted him with a half hug, then disappeared back inside. He sat down next to me without saying a word, just rested a hand lightly on my shoulder. I didn't turn to him. I didn't need to. "We're not a fairy tale," I said. "I know," he replied, "but this feels real." We sat like that for a while, just breathing the same air, not rushing to name it, not needing to. Inside, I had one last envelope ready to mail. I stood, went back into the house, and sealed it quietly. Inside were the signed papers formally revoking Kieran and Varela's rights to future contact or legal claim to our daughter. Not that they had much left to stand on, but I wasn't leaving it open to chance. I pressed the return address label onto the top left corner. Ms. Odalis Reyes and daughter and I smiled. Later that evening, as twilight brushed the sky in pale blue and gold, I recorded something. One last thing for the people who'd been listening. I sat in front of my phone, camera rolling, my face bare, my voice steady. Peace isn't something others hand you when they're done breaking you. It's something you claim when you finally realize you never needed their permission to begin with. I let that sit for a breath. Then I leaned slightly forward, looked straight into the lens. Have you ever had to walk away? Just to be seen again?